Hello, everybody. This is Tyler F.M., and I'm the author of Glorybound, Tyranny of Stone, my debut fantasy novel and first of an ongoing series. If you'd like to get a copy of your own, you can pledge now at backerkit.com. I will place a link to that in the description. Today we're doing part 2 of a little audio series I'm doing where I'm just reading through the book, and if you guys like it, you can go pick up a copy yourself. So, here we go. Chapter 2, A Veil Lifted. Callan jolted awake, dripping in sweat. The embers of a smoldering fire gave rise to a thin strand of smoke that wafted into the cool air. Another sleepless night. It had been 4 days since the spirits of the dead had let him rest, and it seemed they were determined to drive him to madness as revenge. Every time Callan closed his eyes, he saw the faces of the men he killed seared into his eyelids, sometimes how he left them, other times reduced to little more than bones. And when he tried his best to sleep at night, he found himself amongst their numbers, peering down at his own lifeless body as the insects and moss overtook him. Callan turned to Priam, who lay within his bedroll, sleeping with the serenity of a young child. Scoffing, he collapsed back into his own roll, pulling back the fur blanket over his shoulder. But try as he might, rest would not embrace him, and he spent the remainder of the night peering into the embers as his eyes burned with exhaustion. In the morning, Priam awoke with a yawn, rubbing his eyes as he sat up to greet the world around him. Having already been awake for hours, Callan had rebuilt the fire to a healthy state and greeted Priam with a nod. Priam must have noticed the redness of Callan's eyes, for his first statement was not a greeting, but a question. "You don't sleep much, do you?" Priam asked. "Plenty enough," Callan lied. "Don't waste your time worrying about me." "I know you don't trust me, but there's no need to be so paranoid," Priam started. "You were going to let me go. I don't need to kill you to run off. And there's no hard feelings about the rest of them. Not like we were friends, just associates." "Associates?" Callan asked with skepticism. "Yeah, we were all just in it for the money," Priam answered plainly. Callan thought on Priam's words for some time. The notion of fighting and dying alongside someone you held with no greater regard than association nauseated him. But then again, so too did the thought of selling innocent people into lives of servitude. How Priam managed to live with himself, Callan did not know, but before he could give a proper interrogation, Priam once again broke the silence. "You still haven't told me where we're going," Priam stated with an insistent tone. "The Septinian Pass," Callan answered. Have you ever been?" "No, but I've heard lots of it. Breathtaking mountains, and a view of Giant's Pond unlike any other," Priam replied. "You've heard correctly, but we aren't going there for the view," Callan explained. "There is a monastery there, and I wish to speak with the monks." In truth, they had been wandering without direction for the last 4 days. Callan was still too shaken up to think ahead properly, and so the two of them continued down the stretch of road Callan was snatched up from. But last night, as he lay haunted upon the forest floor, he remembered hearing stories of reclusive monks who never left their mountain temple. If anyone would be able to help relieve his nightmares, it would be them. The journey would take another 4 days on foot, and not wanting to waste another moment risking capture by the royal army, the youthful vagabonds packed their belongings and continued down the winding forest path. There was dense green all around, with periodic splotches of yellow and orange as the autumn season took hold of the world. Soon the nights would become cold, and the birds would fall silent until the new year dawned. In the meantime, however, the air was pleasant, with the welcoming breeze making the leaves sing in the trees. They walked late into dusk, just before the sun disappeared below the horizon. That night, They set up camp in a large clearing, with Callan unpacking his things while Priam gathered firewood. When Priam returned, however, it was more than sticks he carried in his arms. He squatted down beside Callan and laid out an assortment of mushrooms before him. "I've been foraging since I was a boy. This here'll be a feast for us tonight," Priam exclaimed. "I'm not eating that," Callan responded with a skeptical look, observing the array of strange-looking mushrooms. Having been raised in the city, he was unfamiliar with foraging, which may be a lethal mistake in this situation. "And why not? They're perfectly good eating," Priam questioned with offense. "Less than a week ago, you held me hostage and tried to sell me into slavery. I will not eat strange fungus you picked out of the dirt based on that kind of relationship," Callan said, raising his voice. Dejected, Priam gathered the mushrooms back to himself. After arranging the scavenged wood into a tent-like structure and setting it alight, he took a knife from his belt and began to shave away the outer skin of the mushrooms. "I know it wasn't right," Priam said half under his breath. "Not proud of myself either, that's for sure. Never intended to end up this way." "And what had you intended?" Callan asked, sprawling his bedroll across the grass and lying back to gaze up at the last clouds of the day, knowing he would soon lose his peace again. "To make something of myself. Had enough of being nobody, of living in squalor. I thought I'd go out and find my claim, make some riches, and live the good life." As Priam spoke, he added some of the larger sticks to the fire, building their source of warmth for the night. Callan chuckled at his new companion's words, smiling upwards at the sky. "Funny, yeah? Me being so naive?" Priam huffed. "Funny that we aren't so different, that's all," Callan replied. "Oh, looking to make some riches to bring back home?" Priam asked. "Not exactly. Never cared for money much. Just looking to actually be someone worth being," Callan explained. "I couldn't stand around making nothing of myself any longer. I didn't know what to do, but I knew I had to do something, and so I left," Callan said as the smile faded from his lips. Their conversation continued, and Callan learned that Priam was of a destitute upbringing. His father was a gambler who never won big and threw away any meager earnings he did make. After some time, he became abusive, causing Priam and his mother to flee. This only lasted a few short years, as illness took Priam's mother, leaving him to fend for himself beginning in his early teens. Callan, in turn, discussed his life growing up in Semil, of the festivals held at the king's, or in these days queen's, manor, of being able to dine on the Prairian serpent, a most prized delicacy only found in the Gulf of Semil, and of playing on narrow cobbled streets with the other children of the city. After a while, the moons were clear in the sky overhead, and the air cooled enough that Callan felt the need to wrap himself in his cloak. Priam soon grew tired, and tossing out his own bedroll, undressed down to his underclothes, and tucked himself beneath a woolen blanket. Callan, meanwhile, stayed put, peering into the warm glow of the campfire, just as he had the night before. Callan thought back on his brief adventure. One day was all it took to permanently alter his soul. No longer only haunted in his dreams, he now began to see the faces of the dead within the flames, the look of terror as they died, the dullness of their eyes after the fact, the tears in their flesh, and the blood that spilled forth. The orange of the flame turned crimson in his eyes as he saw sanguine pools rise from the grass, staining him. His head was spinning, his breath sharp and rapid. What had he done? Was life truly so cheap? Was this the life he desired for so long, to kill and to take the sacred life of another? Were the tales of great battles and ages past nothing but vain attempts to mask the grim reality? Was there truly nothing good in this world? These visions gripped him throughout the night, leaving him clutching handfuls of his hair until the black sky was painted a faint orange once more. Callan peered into all that remained of the campfire, tormented by another sleepless night. The sun crested the tree tops, and the birds began to sing, bringing with them Priam, who arose from his blanket. Callan? Priam called softly, but Callan did not move, his gaze fixed on the last bit of heat, smoldering dimly in a pile of ash. Callan! Priam shouted. Callan flinched, his eyes at last ripped away from their fixation. What is it? Callan asked calmly. Did you sleep? Priam inquired. Some, Callan responded, lying again. After their fill of hard bread and dried meat, they continued southwest to the Septimian Pass. It would take them another 3 days to reach their destination. In that time, the two slowly grew closer, with Callan finally finding himself able to relax around Priam without fear of being stabbed in the back. Callan found the rough nature of his traveling companion to be charming in its own way, and despite his dishonorable past, Priam was surprisingly honest. Perhaps he truly had just run into the wrong people at a pivotal moment in his life. It put Callan's heart somewhat at ease, happy that he had spared Priam's life. If only sparing him was enough to spare Callan the regret of ever having left home. At last, they arrived at their destination. They no longer stood in the lush forests that covered the north of Gildaria. By now, they had crossed from the duchy of Aludair into Durslin, overseen by Duke Rod Bjork. He was perhaps most famous for his never-ending feuding with the queen, but such details mattered little to the monks who resided within these mountains. Callan and Priam spent from morning until late afternoon scaling one such mountain in search of the monastery built here centuries ago. Isn't it breathtaking? Priam said, out of breath. He let out a small chuckle at the irony of his words as he sat upon a fallen tree to rest. Honestly, the most beautiful thing I've seen in my life, Callan answered with a tired smile. By now, his eyes had dark bags beneath them, a manifestation of his exhaustion. He allowed himself to take in the magnificent landscape before them, where the cloud-littered skies met the dense pine wood, and the world seemed to open up to gracefully hold Giant's Pond in place, reflecting the shimmering sunlight from its tranquil waters. But Callan would not allow them to become idle. Just as soon as they caught their breath, they were off once again until they finally found their way to the peak. Awaiting them was a temple, unique in its appearance. It was not made from bricks, as many solid structures were, but instead had been carved from the mountain itself. The ground was dusted with snow, and several robed figures peered at the newcomers. They had an ominous look about them, watching from behind their oversized hoods, their faces shrouded in shadow. Most of the robed men ignored them, but one approached, calling out from behind his shroud of darkness. "Welcome to the monastery of Zirmar," he said. While the top half of his face was concealed by the hood, the bottom half was kept behind a beard of bushy gray hair, and Callan caught a glimpse of his wrinkled skin. "We welcome all travelers, whoever you may be. Please, follow me, and I shall get you acquainted." Callan bowed a greeting, showing respect to the holy man. Priam stood awkwardly, unsure of how to behave. Yet they both followed him through the stone archway that led into the dimly lit interior carved into the mountainside. Tall pillars held up the ceiling, and small streams flowed down the stone into basins below, the sound of trickling water filling the otherwise barren halls. The hooded man lowered his cowl as he entered the building, revealing his pale green eyes, and, despite the mild wrinkling of his skin, a youthful glow radiated from him. His robe, like the rest of the men they saw here, was white as fresh snow, draped in a stole the color of storm clouds, matching the shaggy hair atop his head. "It is lovely to have so many visitors as of late," the monk said with a smile. "Oh, how much more is it now compared to usual?" Callan asked. 3 and 4 days, including the two of you," the robed man replied. "We typically go for months without a single visitor anymore. Too few appreciate the gods in these times." Unfortunately, I don't know much about the gods myself, Callan admitted. That is partly why I'm here. That's wonderful, the monk said with a smile. It is surely the gods who brought you here. The monk escorted Callan and Priam throughout the monastery, getting them acquainted with its layout. At the end of their tour, they were brought into a large chamber in the heart of the mountain. The ceilings towered high above them, and they were in awe. The dark stone now shimmered distinctly, accented with golden trim. Set before them in a large circle loomed imposing statues in the form of 4 wingless dragons, equally spaced at each of the cardinal directions. They faced inwards toward one another, their gaze cast down towards the center of the room, where a 5th dragon resided, curled into a ball, like a child in their mother's womb. Around each of the 4 cardinal dragons, 3 humanoid figures resided. While each of the dragons were larger than most of the man-like images, there was a single exception. At the far end of the room, outside of the circle, stood a man, the tallest amongst them all. This statue appeared to be watching over the rest. An otherworldly crown fashioned from stars rested upon his head. In total, there were 18 statues. The monk referred to this place as the Divine Confluence, a place where all the gods were revered, as opposed to most temples and shrines, which devoted themselves to a single deity. After Callan correctly identified the star-crowned man as Adam, father of all creation, the monk regaled him with the story of the world's creation and Adam's divine family. Sadly, the story was one of betrayal. Adam's perfect children turned against their eldest brother, Ugamat, and fashioned the universe from his body. Their hate twisted their forms, turning them into the menacing figures now known as dragons for all eternity. The dragons distributed various portions of Ugamat's body to be ruled over by their children, and these children likewise gave rise to the multiple races of mortals. So the dragons are evil then? Priam asked. It's not so simple, I'm afraid. While they did turn against their own brother, they faced justice for their actions in the form of their curse, the monk replied. And being creations of the lesser gods, humans, elves, and ogres are, in a way, the grandchildren of the dragons. Why should they hold any ill will towards us? As the 2 of them spoke, Callan's attention was fixed on the dragon at the center of the room. Perhaps it was his exhaustion, but he found himself unable to look away. Suddenly, he interrupted the others. Why is Ugamat a dragon? He asked, pointing towards the curled-up statue. That's him, right? A sharp eye on you, the monk said with a smirk. You see, it is commonly believed that Ugamat's rage at his betrayal rendered his own soul into a similar state to his siblings. But isn't he dead? Priam questioned, confused as ever. Not so, the monk clarified. This material world of ours acts more as a prison than a grave. The great dragons can never truly be killed, unless by the will of Adam. In fact, it is the very same soul that sustains us. Ugamat's life flows invisibly through this world, holding it together. Mana, Callan said, almost in a whisper. The monk chuckled at his remark. Yes, some have called it that in ages past, the monk said. They say that long ago, Ugamat's spirit flowed forth much more freely, allowing us mortals to tap into its abundant power. Whether or not that is true, I have yet to decide. With their tour of the monastery concluded, the guests were invited to dinner. It would be another hour or so before it was finished, and they were permitted to roam freely in the meantime. The monk was about to part with them, but as he turned, Callan grabbed him by the sleeve. I'm sorry, but there's something else I wanted to talk about, Callan confessed. Certainly. What is on your mind? The monk inquired. I would like to go somewhere private, Callan said, leaning in with a whisper. The monk nodded in understanding, and the 2 of them parted ways with Priam, who was left to explore his curiosity. Callan was worried about what Priam might get up to on his own, but surely things would be all right. Callan was brought to a small office, stuffy and windowless, the cluttered desk illuminated by a single candle. The monk took a seat, motioning for Callan to sit opposite him. It took only a moment before Callan spilled his guts to the old monk. The nightmares, the sleeplessness, the guilt. He held back tears as the tension spilled forth from his heart and into that of the monk, who sat back and absorbed his pain like a sponge. Only after Callan finished did the monk speak. "Callan, listen to me," he said in a calm tone, leaning forward as he spoke and catching the young man's eyes. "To fight and to die, these are immutable truths in the life of every man that Eratan raised from the dirt. Some men fight on the battlefield, others in the debate hall, and others still in prayer. But we all must fight. Likewise, when Adam calls us back to him, we all must return." "You say that, but it isn't your hands stained with their blood," Callan retorted. He was still distressed, but the sense of immediate panic left him. "These men were wicked, Callan," the monk attempted to explain. "Murderers, slavers, thieves. They brought ruin to the lives of countless innocents, and they would have brought death and servitude to countless more without your intervention, you included. In such cases, it can be a mercy to end such men." With Callan's emotions wrangled in, the two of them continued to sit and talk. Time seemed to melt away as the gray man's words seeped into Callan's heart. At the end of it, the monk offered a prescription for Callan's affliction: meditation. Callan was instructed to sit comfortably in his chair and to close his eyes. Meanwhile, the monk used the solitary candle to light a stick of incense, flooding the cramped office with aromatic smoke. The calming voice of the monk began to guide Callan into the quiet within himself. Deeper and deeper he went. But Callan's nose began to itch. He could not help but scratch it, starting his meditation anew. And then his toe fit uncomfortably in his boot, bringing him once again to the surface of his mind. Callan found the practice to be a great distraction from any inner turmoil, as he became immediately aware of the smallest of bodily discomforts. Suddenly, the sound of a large bell resounded throughout the monastery, signaling for all to make way to the dining hall. The monk concluded their meditation with the promise of further instruction in the morning. In the dining hall, it was easy for Callan to spot Priam amongst the sea of white robes. Easier to spot still was the man he was talking to, a tall figure with golden hair draped all the way down his back. He wore similar garments to the monks around him, but instead of white, his robes were a dull purple. "Callan," Priam hollered, "this is the other visitor we heard about." As Callan approached, the details of the stranger's face revealed to be a decade their elder. But most striking of all was the emerald gleam of his eyes. The man reached out his hand for a shake, meeting with Callan's. "Menthel Whitsong, a pleasure to meet you." And that'll do it for Chapter 2. I hope you enjoyed. Again, if you'd like to pick up a copy of your own, you can get it at the link in the description below. We will be adding hardcover copies and signed hardcover copies here, if this uploads when I think it will, tomorrow. And we'll be doing probably one more of these, so we'll get the first 3 chapters in as a little preview if you're into that. And yeah, hope to see you there.